All right, we are now recording. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Okay, what's everybody seeing?
You see your screen, yep.
Okay, great, good. Okay, so we're coming together today to discuss and, if possible, vote on some of the optional provisions of Secure Act 2.0 that are pertinent to 457 plans. And because they're optional, these start dates, these are just the earliest dates that we could implement them. You know, just like when we implemented the Roth or the self-directed brokerage account, you know, those were already in place. And so we, at some point, decided to implement them when it made sense to implement them for our plan. So any of these that you don't implement today, correct me if I'm wrong, Shelley and Brent, they could be revisited in the future after they're available to start, correct?
Correct.
So I could start at the top, but I think I'm going to actually start with the removal of the first of the month requirement. I had seen information that it was mandatory, but according to Voya Legal, it's actually optional. So just FYI, we've actually already started this.
Yeah.
Basically, prior to the enactment of Secure Act 2.0, we had to wait to implement employee contribution changes the first paycheck, or we did it the first paycheck of the month if they requested the change the month before. And this allows us to implement these changes every payday. So is there anybody that would like to discuss it more or have any questions about it?
I'm shaking my head no.
Sorry, I can't see anybody anymore with my screen sharing.
Yeah, Miranda, when you don't show your, you don't show your face, Miranda, we can't see that.
I know. I'm remoted to my work tower and I don't have a computer on that tower anyway.
Oh.
My hair looks great today. I'll just say that.
Well, that's a waste if we can't see you.
So, Billy, I guess my question on a bunch will be, is there any overriding administrative problem in actually implementing any of these? This doesn't appear to be.
This is a really good thing. We've been waiting for it for a very long time. Yeah. In fact, when we were able to get started with Voya to receive the file upload from them, because prior to that, we were having employees turn in a form and I would data enter everything from the form. Now they go to Voya to make their changes. Voya sends me an upload file. And we actually already had that file in place to be sent every 2 weeks anyway. So we were already ready administratively for this to happen whenever it happened. So we are good to go in that respect.
Great, thank you.
I've got a question along the same vein as Bob's, and that is, do any of these options increase the administrative costs for Voya that are passed along to us as plan participants?
That is yet to be seen. I would say the majority is probably a no. I think some of them that may be heavier lifts per se, for example, student loans, which I think Billy is on your grid here somewhere. The student loan, trying to get the right word, student loan payments for matching purposes, that may or may not be even in the mix for the county as far as, you know, taking it under serious consideration. But things like that may be heavier lifts from a setup standpoint, there may be additional costs, but at this point, I'm thinking zero or very little expense here, probably zero for most of these optional options. To the first of the month rule, as an example, we've been waiting for that for decades. I think everyone has. So we were ready to go with this right away, and again, at no additional cost. So I don't anticipate, at least at this point in time, that there would be any adjustment to the pricing for Clackamas County.
And I just want to call out, I appreciate both Bob and Bronson, your comments and considering kind of the administrative load. That's one of the things that we have taken away internally to figure out with our technology teams. What can we do? What can't we do? What is kind of on a roadmap for PeopleSoft, et cetera. So thank you very much for bringing those things forward, and we will share more as we go through these as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question, Billy. I'm wondering, and I apologize for coming in a little late on this call, but I'm wondering what we were planning, if we were going to look at these all separately for a vote, or how do we want to proceed?
I was planning to do them separately. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brent and Shelley, these don't have any impact on each other.
Nope.
They're all separate and independent of each other.
Yes, and I would recommend a vote on each, because you may choose not to adopt some and, along the way. So.
And as
Yeah,
I mentioned earlier, if you choose not to adopt some now, we can always revisit them and adopt them later, as the
And
business need requires.
And we have enough people for a quorum, so
Yes.
if I have to jump off, which I will have to do, going through it individually, I think would be easier to get my input.
Okay, thanks, Evelyn. That's helpful.
Agreed. So I'm happy to make a motion on this first one. If we don't have any further conversation around it or discussion. I move that we approve the alignment of those deferred compensation elections. Can you, sorry, I can't read I was gonna see if I could read the.
Aligns deferral timing of deferral elections in a government 457 plan with elections.
That, yes. So I vote to approve aligning the deferral timing.
I'll second, Billy.
And I'll second. Oh,
Oops. Okay, who's gonna second?
I'll let Bob. We
Okay.
haven't seen him in a while.
Okay, when I call your name, please say yes to accept, no to not accept, or you can abstain. Elizabeth Comfort,
Yes.
Miranda Dean,
Yes.
Christy Durham,
Yes.
Rob Sadowski,
Yes.
Evelyn Minor Lawrence,
Yes.
Bronson Rueda,
Yes.
Ben Wiley,
Yes.
Bob Froman,
Yes.
and since I can't see everybody, has Robert Russo joined us? Or Brian Nava?
Actually, Billy, Brian was yes when you called for Ben Wiley. Brian was the affirmation there, so we need to check back in with Ben.
Ben, are you there?
I am. I was a yes vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I just want to get that one out of the way. I thought that would probably be the easiest one. So let's jump back just up to the top here. Save this. So the first one is the qualified birth and adoption distributions. And I looked at our plan document. Shelley, Brent, I believe this was from Secure, the original Secure Act.
That's correct.
Okay, and so this committee did adopt this provision. And when I was looking at our plan document language, the thing that I didn't see noted was the 3-year period restriction on repaying in our document. So I believe this, if I'm reading it correctly, would add a 3-year restriction on being able to repay the qualified birth or adoption distribution that we don't currently have.
Right. It just allows for the repayment of amounts taken for birth or adoption.
Somebody would like to get the money back into a tax deferred account, they could do so.
Right.
Right.
Oh, okay. I was gonna ask, can you explain this? But I thank you for that.
Yeah, so our current language allows for the repayment, but I did not see any language saying that you had to do it within a certain period of time. This would place a 3-year period from the date that the funds were received to pay it back instead of an unlimited amount of time to pay it back, if I'm reading it correctly.
Yep. That's the purpose of this provision in Secure 2.0 is just to establish the time limit for repayment.
Why 3 years versus
Unlimited.
2 or not? No,
Oh.
not unlimited. I
Okay.
don't think unlimited, but 2 years or 5 years. I'm just curious.
You know, honestly, that's a question. I guess we'd have to ask the people that made the rules. I have no idea. It's like the
Okay.
145 on the catch up, right? We don't know where 145K a year came from either.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I could be wrong on this, but I don't think if you want to have somebody do a qualified birth underneath Secure Act 2.0, I don't think you have the ability to keep your prior language and do it indefinitely. You have to conform to the new 3-year period. So if you want to allow people to be able to take a qualified distribution for a birth or adoption, now you have to put this language in, or you just don't have that option going forward. That's my understanding. I don't know if you have it differently, Shelley.
No, it's probably, this is, and I'm from memory, so correct me here, Brent, but remember in the original Secure Act, there was a repayment of participants who, for example, took loans and or distributions from their account for COVID. And there was so maybe this correlates with the repayment period for that. I did check internally with our operations team, and just FYI, there was no shortage of people, you know, taking money out of their retirement accounts for the COVID relief that was provided under the original Secure. And the repayment percent, or the number of participants repaying those amounts is practically zero.
Yeah, I would say, I don't think it's such a small amount for
Yeah.
5,000.
5,000.
As you guys know, from if it's like a loan, how are the payments going to be made? Through payroll reduction? Are they going to write a check to Voya? And then you're putting after-tax money back in a pre-tax account. So, I mean, if we have to adopt the language saying that they have to repay within 3 years, I think like Shelley said, it's going to be like 0 to 1% of somebody that actually wants to put it back in. Right? And how is that?
Well, they would, my understanding is it would work like COVID, that if they did take that 3-year, they could go back and amend their tax return. So it wouldn't be after tax money.
Oh, that their accountant would have to adjust it.
Yeah.
Well, when our assessors were asking about administratively, if it doesn't have to go through the county or payroll or like a loan 401k or 457 loan provision, then I guess the burden of owners is on the participant to correct their return and amend the contribution. But
yeah, because it's good faith anyway.
well, I think the provision is important. I mean, I've had a couple people at Marion County do this, which is nice. And if anybody's had a new child, or you take extra time off for leave without pay on maternity leave, I think it's a great opportunity. But I do think that the actual repayment of the distribution is going to be like somebody repaying a hardship. I mean, if you're taking the money out because you need it for birth or adoption, I don't think their primary concern is putting $5,000 back into their account at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I just wanted to be clear on what Brent said. I mean, this would be more restrictive than what we currently have. But if we approve this, or if we don't approve this, does that mean our current language is no longer applicable?
No. You can keep the provision in place, and in other words, allow your participants up to 5,000 for birth or adoption of a child without the repay option.
Okay.
Brent, Is that,
So
I
if
wanted
they-
to check too, because I thought I heard you saying, Brent, that it was one or the other. You have to
Yeah.
take a
Right.
repayment
That's what I
with
thought.
it. Otherwise, you can't have it. Can you
can't
clarify what
have-
you
You
said?
can't have a payment that goes indefinitely.
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard
So-
you say, because I was gonna say, if they don't pay it back within the 3-year period, then that goes away. They don't have that option to put, so it's year 5 that they find themselves in a position where they can do the repayment. It's too late.
And again, not 100%, but my understanding of it is they're tightening this back up so that this didn't have a kind of a loophole from the last one where you could pay this back 5 years, 10 years down the road, where COVID had a very specific 3-year repayment.
Mhm.
So going forward, my understanding is you can allow for distributions for birth and adoption, but you will not have an indefinite repayment period going
And that
forward.
makes sense.
With
Okay.
it, it'll be none, or you can never repay back, or the 3-year. So in my mind, it's like,
Okay.
why wouldn't you give the option? Even though I agree with everyone, the odds of
Right.
people using it is going to be slim and none. But even if
Yeah.
it's 1 or 2 participants that find themselves in a cash flow situation to put it back over that 3-year period, might as well afford it to them.
Yeah, I think it's a nice option to make available to our employees, and again, and also the fact that we have the time limitations spelled out. So if they choose to exercise this, they've got, here's the window in which they have to repay it. If they can't repay it within that time frame, then they've lost that option. But leaving it out there indefinitely, I don't think that is good for the program.
Yeah.
So I'd like it. I don't have any problem with this.
From an administrative standpoint, all this would really require a participant do is submit, for example, a check with a special form, basically saying this is what this is for. And then we would put it back in their account pre-tax,
Okay.
in the pre-tax bucket.
I have
Brian?
a clarifying question. If somebody takes a distribution, is the repayment required?
No,
Okay. So if somebody takes a distribution, obviously somebody already said it, but if somebody takes a distribution, they're obviously having cash flow issues or they're wanting just a little bit extra cash. So they take a distribution, and whether they pay it back or not is up to them. This provision just allows them to pay it back and then identifies a timeline. Am I understanding this correctly?
That's what I understand.
yes, it's basically just expanding it. You're already providing for the distribution of up to 5K for birth or adoption. All this is enhancing that to allow the participants who partake of that provision. It's allowing them up to 3 years to put that money back into their retirement account.
And
And then
again,
as-
And we're not.
our current
changing the
language
5,000,
allows them
right?
to do that, with no set time period required to make that repayment.
It provides for the distribution, Bob, but it does not yet provide for any repayment.
Any repayment. Okay,
No, our plan
Does it?
document provides for a repayment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Billy, you're right.
It did not specify a limit on time to do that.
right. They could
right.
repay it 10
You're
years
right.
from now or 15 years from now.
That's what I read, yes.
Yep, you're right,
Okay.
my bad.
But my understanding is that won't be afforded going forward. Like that provision will be in contradiction to the new law. So that would need to be amended, no matter what you decide today, to either be you're not allowing repayment or you're going to conform to the 3-year time period.
Now, does the repayment option only come into play if somebody's maxed out their contributions? Is that correct? Because
No.
so what is the option, right? So if I'm putting 10% of my paycheck into deferred comp, which is not going to max out, I'm not going to reach the contribution limits. So then if I do repayment, like if I take a distribution and then I'm going to repay it, I can still just put that much more money into my deferred comp account. Now, if I'm at my contribution limits, is that really where, is that really where it comes into play? Like I've maxed out my contributions, and then Sorry, I keep getting messages that are flashing in front of my screen. So if I max out my contribution limits and then I have this repayment option, can I then contribute more than the 23.5 or 22.5 or whatever it is this year? Am I understanding that correctly?
They're kind of different. Yes, you can theoretically, if you took a distribution earlier in the year and then you end up maxing out, it might net out to be the same thing, but really they're kind of independent of each other. Is like if you took money out in a given plan year, you could put it back in later that year if you wanted to, if you didn't need it. In reality, if you needed the money within 12 months, you probably aren't putting it back. This really is, hey, this happened in a prior year. Do you want to, in addition to what you've put in so far, do you want to put this in that would either allow you to put in more than the maximum for that year? Because technically, just to be, you're not doing more than the maximum. You're doing the maximum for that given year, and you're going back to a prior year and putting it back in under that cap. And it would impact a different tax year. So, that's the main reason for somebody to do this is they'd say, hey, I can put the money back in and reduce my taxes for this year or more likely than not, the prior year. Yeah, and it makes sense to do that, or they won't do it.
Okay, and with our current language, we can still do that. All this new language is doing is require those repayments to be within 3 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of where that might play out, and I'm just painting broadly. But if somebody did take a distribution and then their income, they either retired or maybe they went to part-time or maybe they ended up staying home for a while. Let's say their income went down. It might make sense to, from the year they took the distribution, it might make sense to go back and amend that tax return and put it back in and they pay less taxes. It's, again, something they'll work with either some tax software or with an accountant, but those are kind of the nuances where folks would go back and do it.
So I want to call out Brian Nava. You've had your hand raised for a little bit. And then also we've had a couple of comments in chat about awareness of time.
Yeah.
So Brian, do you have something that you wanted to ask or add to the conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. Yeah, I just want to make sure that partial repayments, well, 2 questions. Partial repayments are okay. So if you intended to pay it all and couldn't, that's fine. And then Brent, you keep saying that if the law passes, so it's not set in stone yet that this will be an either or option. It just looks like it's going to be, or it is going to be. I just want to make sure that we're voting on something that is actually going to happen, or has happened, I should say.
This is already law.
It's law.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And
So
the
is somebody
first
gonna
one-
make a motion to add the 3-year repayment restriction?
One quick moment, Wendy. Brian, you asked the first question. I'm not sure that you got an answer to was, are partial repayments allowed? And those are permissible.
Yes.
Thank you.
I move we adopt this.
Second.
Hold on.
Moving us
Usually-
along.
Yeah, we're
Who was
moving here.
Who was the second?
Evelyn.
Hey,
Brian
Miranda,
needs to
you're
put his
usually the
hand
first.
down because he gets me confused.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. Can you restate the motion? My phone glitched.
Establishes a time limit for repayment of qualified birth and adoptions for those participants who wish to repay. Establishes a 3-year time limit per the Secure Act 2.0 language for repayment of qualified birth or adoptions for those participants who wish to repay.
Okay, thank you.
Does Brian have a question? His hand is raised.
Oh, sorry, no more questions. Thank you.
Okay, when I call your name, say yes to accept, no to not accept, or you can abstain. Elizabeth Comfort,
Yes.
Miranda Dean,
Yes.
Christy Durham,
Yes.
Rob Sadowski,
Yes.
Evelyn Minor Lawrence,
Yes.
Brian Nava,
Bueller.
Brian, are you there?
Keep going, Billy, and then come back to Brian.
Bronson Rueda,
Yes.
Ben Wiley,
No.
Bob Roman,
Yes.
Brian Nava,
He's
Okay,
off
we-
the call now,
Okay.
Billy.
we have 7, which is enough to make it pass.
I see Brian on the call. He must be on another call at the same time.
No, sorry, I was setting up the elevator. I just got back to the office. Sorry, I'm running from off campus to on campus appointments. I accept. I tried to put it in chat before I got up. Thank you guys for your patience.
Okay, thank you. Okay, motion passes. Next item is the self-certification of unforeseen emergency withdrawals. So a plan administrator could rely on an employee certification that a hardship withdrawal or unforeseen emergency distribution is based upon immediate and heavy financial need as described in the Treasury regulations, and that the amount requested is no more than is necessary. Shelley, can you provide a little background on what the current procedure is that Voya follows?
Well, I believe that we are currently, Voya is reviewing, collecting all the documentation, reviewing and rendering approval or lack thereof on the individual UE hardship requests that come in. Only if we deny a request will the county be called in to basically consider. If, for example, if participants denied a hardship request, they can ask the county to review it for, appeal the decision that Voya has made. So basically all this is saying is that the participant, much like it was with the COVID distributions, for example, a participant would be able to request an unforeseen emergency withdrawal from their 457 account and self-certify that they qualify for such a withdrawal. So in other words, there's no real vetting or anything. It's basically you're reliant on the, in good faith on the participant being honest and, trustworthy.
So historically, we've been doing the hardships since 2009 when we became sole provider. So if somebody has a hardship, and Billy and I just had the most horrific hardship in my 33-year history, because this woman was literally paralyzed with this neurological order, couldn't even hold a pen. And so Billy and I got a little involved with home office. We actually shared the story on our last call because it was so successful, is helping this woman facilitate her hardship request when she was unable to hold a pen and complete the paper application. So the process is now somebody wants a hardship. It's completely confidential. It doesn't go through me, doesn't go through Billy. Person calls Voya home office, they request the hardship application. It can either be emailed or mailed. They fill out the hardship application, they submit it directly to Voya Legal. It takes 1 to 3 business days for a turnaround and approval. The hardship definitions given, they have to fill out the application. Voya Legal review, and Billy's team and the amazing people in payroll, Greta and Laurel, did a Billy, what am I looking for? A loss of wage due to a medical layoff, provided that documentation, and we had approval in 1 day to get this woman her money, which was amazing. So what you're talking about is Voya Legal doing all the IRS guidelines, all the definition of what counts, what doesn't count, a very quick turnaround, no county participation. As soon as the hardship approval is applied, then those monies can be direct deposited, wire transferred to the participant's checking account. So right now we're in about a 10-day window, which is pretty good turnaround for hardship approval, legal approval, and everything's handled through home office. And Billy and I only got involved because this woman was physically unable to actually write the application. So if you're, conversation is, do we want to allow participants to say that they have a financial hardship, self-certify, and you lose that Voya legal approval? And Brent can chime in here, and Shelley, since, but Multnomah, Portland, Marion, Salem, Washington County, none of our other employers feel like they're going to allow employee self-certification where they still want a little bit more, stricter guidelines as far as what constitutes a hardship. And we already are providing that legal resource for you at no cost.
And in the example Wendy gave, if you approve this option, it would have eliminated the need to have payroll produce the lost wages report that was turned in with the documentation for this hardship withdrawal. So that lost wages report not only was, showing that there was satisfaction of the IRS requirements, but it also showed the dollar amount that was part of the, request is no more than is necessary provision.
So just to confirm, if we accepted the allowance of self-certification, there would be no vetting of confirming that the standards that the Treasury regs set out are being met.
Correct.
And this was a format that was used for COVID.
And I'm wondering why this even came forward, if it's just that it was effective because we were in the middle of a pandemic, and should we carry this forward? Do we have an idea of utilization and the risks associated with that?
Well, the risk is really on should the participant, for example, Christy, ever be audited, the burden of proof is on that participant to prove that he or she did indeed qualify for this, this hardship distribution. I don't believe there's any what's the word I'm looking for on the part of the county, right? The sponsor. Obviously, I don't know, honestly, when I saw this as an optional provision, I was kind of like, why would they do this? Right.
Yeah.
Given that some plans had an extraordinarily amount of money leave the plan during the COVID pandemic, and not all of we're pretty certain not all of the, self-certifications were, honest.
Mhm.
So,
I think that you'll see that there's one exception. The general theme in this Secure Act is trying to take some of the burdens off plan sponsors. Where they just are tired of having to get in and arbitrate these employee situations, create bad will where they have to make a definitive decision whether the event justifies or not. They don't feel like they have the expertise, and two, they don't want to be put in that awkward position. And this legislation largely, or like I said, there's one exception, allows plan sponsors to outsource and put this back on the participant. Now, will there be abuse? Certainly, but it does allow people to get at their money if they need it, and gets the plan sponsor out. And really, Clackamas County, like others, will just have to decide, do you want to be more paternalistic and kind of protect people from themselves? Or do you want to make it as flexible, not only to participants, but also to the county, kind of get you out of that process? It really, there's no wrong answer. It's just, how do you want to operate your plan?
Yeah. How do you want to operate? Yeah.
Well, we're actually currently not completely in the process. Since Voya took over doing the hardship withdrawals for us in 2009, no one has ever requested a second review of a denial from the county. I've never had to pull this committee together to do a second review of a denial. Typically what I've seen, we've in the past received reports of hardship withdrawals unidentified, and typically if it was not, if it was denied, oftentimes Voya will reach out to the participant to see if they have anything else going on in their life that would qualify for this withdrawal.
Yeah.
So Voya does go above and beyond in this process to really keep us out of the mix, and has done a great job since 2009.
Well, and I would say that, with Billy and I able to step in and help, that's a rare example. That's the hardship Billy and I have been involved in years, and it was just a unique example. But I think a lot of plan sponsors still don't, it was the burden was on the committee, and you'd have to meet once a month to review all the hardships for the month and try to get the whole committee together. And then usually somebody on the committee would know who the person was based on the situation of hearing about it. So you have complete, confidentiality, even with my office not seeing it. It's a very quick turnaround. Voya is vetting it. So, if I'm Billy and I would say, in like Brent said, with the run on the bank during COVID, I had somebody who actually their accountant said that wasn't a COVID distribution and they had to take a huge tax hit. And it was one of your retirees. And I was involved with the CPA and the whole thing was a nightmare. So I would say if we have a choice, this can always be something on all of these optional provisions. You can come back as a committee and decide to add it later. I think what we're trying to determine today is initially what are things that we want to move forward with. And if I would, a voting member, I would say I would not open this, you know, Pandora's box of a run for the bank if we don't have to.
Yeah, I don't understand the impact it would have on the program as a whole. And if we don't have to adopt it, it's an option, then I'm where Wendy is. We can come back and revisit it once we have a little more history with it or experience with it. I don't quite follow the need
Well,
to add this.
And if we looked at Clackamas County history, when Shelley does our, you know, demographic review, I think that we average maybe 4 to 6 hardships a year. We're talking again, like a really minor population of people that are even applying, let alone receiving approval. So
It's
That's my
really only
input.
during difficult financial times, like during the recession, for example, that we see a lot more of the hardship withdrawal requests for past due rent, foreclosures, things like that.
So I'd like to make a motion to decline this option to self-certify for unforeseen withdrawals.
Second,
Miranda will second that. Oh, Evelyn seconded.
Miranda can have it.
Okay.
yeah, she's usually our go girl on these things.
I'm trying to listen more and see everyone's perspective.
Okay, so when I call your name, say yes to decline, say no to accept, allowing plan sponsors the choice to accept self-certification for hardships and unforeseen emergency distributions, or you can abstain. Is that clear for everybody? I hope.
Yes to decline, right?
Yes to decline Elizabeth Comfort,
Yes, to decline.
Miranda Dean,
Yes.
Christy Durham,
Yes.
Rob Sadowski,
Abstain.
Evelyn Minor Lawrence,
Yes,
Ryan Nava,
I'm gonna actually say no on this one.
Bronson Rueda,
No.
Ben Wiley.
No,
What was that? Sorry.
that was a no.
No. Okay, thanks. And Bob Roman. Bob, you there?
I just want to be clear that a yes is to decline acceptance of this at this time.
Correct.
Then it's a yes.
Okay, there are not enough votes to pass anything. So when that happens, we maintain the status quo. So,
Or alternatively, you can entertain a motion, additional motion. So anyone who voted, in this case, no, could offer a additional motion to see if we could go the other way.
thank you, Rob. Is there anyone who would like to do that? Brian, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I don't know that I voted no just because it seemed like it was more restrictive on our members, and I don't know that I want to offer a motion to accept it either. Maybe Rob, your abstain was the more appropriate one to do. I guess I just needed more time to think about it, maybe more input from people, employees, a part of the deferred comp as well, just because it does seem more restrictive. And in the past, this committee, I felt like has tried to not do as much to restrict members in how they want to access their funds. So that was I was
Well-
torn between abstain and no, and I'm just, maybe I misunderstood it, because like I said, I was in the car, so I apologize for that, but that's where my basis was for the no and abstain, but I'm
So-
not ready to make a motion at this point to also allow it, because I just feel like I don't have enough information yet. Sorry, Wendy, I'm not meaning to cut you off. I just want to.
No, honey.
Jump in, please.
So basically, by saying yes and not allowing self-certification, we're not changing the current structure of what we're doing. So it's not making any more punitive changes. It means that the hardship application process will still get vetted through Voya. And somebody does have the ability to appeal to the county committee if they feel that their denial was not acceptable. So by saying yes means that we're staying on course. By saying that you want to add this, it means that you would no longer have hardships vetted through Voya. Anybody that's applying for a hardship could just self-document, and we would no longer be running the hardships through Voya. All of your employees would be submitting their own hardships requests with no documentation. The burden of the documentation would be, like Shelley said, should the client be audited, or the IRS challenge it, which is unlikely. So by saying yes, you're just saying, we're happy with how it's vetted through Voya. The county has no responsibility. You know that there is, a validation of IRS determination through Voya legal. So by saying yes, you're just not changing anything and making it more accessible for the employees. We'd be doing it the same way we've been doing it since the plan started.
Right, and I think I understand that. I think my part is that if we passed it as is, so that it wasn't vetted through Voya, they would have easier access, quicker access, because it would go through, and it would be it would be on them, but that would be less restrictive because it wouldn't have to go through Voya or potentially the committee, right?
Where would it
Voya-
go though? Where would it go? Would it go to Voya and they would just receive it and give the money, or
Yeah.
would the
They would
county
sign-
become involved in any
and
way?
They would
Legal re-
submit a form, Christy, self-certifying that they're being truthful in making the request, and we would process it just like any other distribution.
So the actual delay, Brian, is 1 to 2 business days. Voya Legal sometimes does it in the same day. So they'd still have to get the form, they'd still have to complete it, they'd still have to submit it. It just wouldn't have the 24 to 48 hour legal review. It would just go straight to a distribution approval. And then the money would still be wire transferred. So in the old days, or some employers that don't have a deferred comp vendor that does it for them, the delay would be having to get the committee together to review the hardship, gather everybody around to make a vote. So I can understand smaller, maybe municipalities that don't have, a single provider that's providing that. But the delay, honestly, is still going to be, if you retire, Brian, and you want us to drop money in your checking account, it's still, 5 to 10 business days. There isn't really much of an expedited process by having the employees submit self-certification.
Right. Sorry, Wendy, and I should have clarified too, because then it's on them to, two things. You're right. The delay is not that significant, but then it's on them to decide if they meet the hardship versus
Sure.
Voya or this committee to decide, and then it's on them to, have to defend it as well. So that's why I was kind of a no, maybe an abstain, because I was thinking, boy, I do our employees appreciate that legal review and want it? Could we just amend it to say, hey, we give them the option to say, hey, you can self-certify, or we recommend you go through Voya's legal review to make sure you don't get through there. That's where the speediness of this, I'm kind of going with, boy, I'm trying to vote in the way where I think it's what the employees want and what's best for the
Yeah.
deferred thing. I'm just
And
torn, really.
And hey, Brian, if you decide to just leave it as is, or if you vote to just streamline the process for participants and say they can self-certify, there would not be an option to have the legal review. If you do with the good faith, no, employee can self-certify that they qualify for this distribution, then legal review is off the table. That becomes a non-factor.
I'd be curious. There were a couple other people that said no or abstain that are from the unions too, I think. So just be curious what the reasoning was behind that.
Yeah, I share that idea, Brian. I'd love to hear other perspectives.
Oh, I'm actually going to ask, do we still have a quorum if I leave?
Let's see.
And I gotta leave too, Billy. But I can let my next appointment know if I need 5 more minutes, but
Yeah, we have 8 people currently. We can lose up to 2 and still have a quorum.
Okay, there's been a Washington County deputy that's been shot.
Oh,
So I will go.
okay.
The reason I voted no was to maintain status quo. So I guess a yes would have maintained status quo as well. So that's all. That's my thought on that one.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Be safe.
Okay. Yep. Take care.
I can talk
Oh.
about
Go
one.
ahead.
Where are we now, Billy?
because Ben just changed his vote to yes.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me. So,
It is, it is a yes at this point?
Yes.
Okay, and I, and I voted yes.
so that gives us 6, which is enough to pass the motion.
Okay, then correct me
So
if
we're
I'm
going
wrong.
to self,
If, and it
Sorry.
doesn't, well, I didn't mean to, quick question, hopefully, if it's not quick, then no need to answer. I thought originally that, there was, a good faith requirement to make distributions or requests for distributions that were a hardship, to be vetted, for the tax deferral status of the plan itself. Is that incorrect, or is it just no longer true?
No, that is true. I mean, the thing is, if when you had to have systems in place, like if a hardship comes in, if Clackamas County would have been audited prior to 2009 and the IRS came in and said, what kind of documentation did you obtain in order to approve these hardships? Then the IRS audit would have asked for what is your hardship process? You know, how are they vetted? What guidelines are you following? Who's making these decisions? So that is, and Bob, in my 33 years, hardships have always, you know, had to be approved by the Deferred Comp Committee. Then when we went to the singular provider status, Voya was smart, said, hey, guess what we'll do? We'll offer legal approval for hardship. So you won't have to pull your committee members together and you won't have to be involved in these, you know, kind of stressful situations where employees are asking for the money. So that is still true. So if Clackamas County were ever audited, Voya Legal would show every hardship and what was vetted and how that process was done. So you are correct, Bob. That's always been in place since the plan started.
And this might be something that we need to revisit at a later time, but I do think that there is an important distinction. And again, we can have legal weigh in. But right now, Voya is doing this on behalf of the county. And if Voya was found to have an error,
Judy Smith, do you have a moment?
that it would ultimately the plan that the tax deferred.
You can call me back.
I mean, this is a really wild hypothetical. Let's say that there was a
Sorry.
flaw in
Sorry,
Voya's.
Brent, just one moment. Billy, could you please mute Evelyn?
Yeah, I'm muting me now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, it's on another screen.
And I think this is important, you know, like it's a very technical issue, but my understanding here is ultimately at the end of the day, if there was fault found with Voya's review process or the committee's process prior, the penalty is the deferred taxation of the plan could be at risk.
Right.
Okay. Under this provision, the plan is getting relief. It no longer has responsibility. If there is an error, it becomes a problem for the individual, not the plan. So again, we can't do anything about stuff prior to. That was the way the law was up to this. But going forward, the liability of a mistake or taking money out that didn't meet the technical definitions for an exemption is an individual, not a plan issue. So I think that's an important distinction. I don't think it's like a high probability because Voya knows what they're doing. But if you all were doing this yourselves, I'd say get your record keeper like Voya to do it, or adopt this provision. Just get out of this business for just liability reasons. But like you said, it's been working well with Voya, so I don't think you have a wrong answer. But I wanted to make sure you all were clear on that kind of technical difference there.
So Billy, do we have enough to pass this?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And it may be something that based on the level of conversation that we've had around this, that we bring back as a conversation, you know, a couple of meetings from now, just to check in after the dust has settled.
And Billy, just to clarify, motion passes means that you're going to stay with the status quo, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
How about that?
Now everyone knows why we scheduled an additional meeting.
Okay, so this one, treatment of employer contributions as Roth after tax. An employer may designate matching contributions or non-elective contributions as Roth contributions, provided that the participant is fully vested in such Roth employer contributions. So the only group that has matching contributions from the employer is CCOM, which does not provide a voting member to this committee. And what are these non-electives? I don't think I.
That would be money that the employer contributes. That's not a match.
So we do have other groups that do fall into that category. Currently, those are being contributed as pre-tax contributions. That's the way our system has them set up. From a system perspective, the code used to do these contributions is actually also tied to the employee contribution. So from that perspective, it would require some serious setup changes by our workforce data management team to make this type of a change. So I think before, when I was looking at language provided in other documentation, it only said matching. It didn't say anything about non-elective until the most recent documentation that Shelley sent to me. So Christine, when you and I talked to Lee and Cynthia about this, the information I had said just matching. It didn't say anything about non-elective. So, but knowing how things are set up in PeopleSoft from when I do contribution changes as well as set up new contributions in our system, those codes are tied together for both the employee and the employer. And also, I'm talking with Oracle regarding our PeopleSoft system. They're going to, of course, be focusing on the mandatory provisions before they will be focusing on any optional provisions as well. So if we decide to adopt this, we may not be able to adopt something like this until Oracle is ready to make the programming changes available.
And I had a big conversation with Voya 2 weeks ago, and we are only able to focus on what's mandatory this year. Even if you had your Oracle systems in place, they don't even have a month projected on when this optional provision to have post-tax ER dollars even be submitted to Voya. We don't have the systems in place for that. And we were told that it's mandatory only for 2023. And again, this can be something that can be dealt with today. I know we're starting to kind of lose our herd right now, but any of these things optional things can be revisited after NAGDA, maybe when there's further clarification, because Brent, this is a pretty big topic, and as well as the post-tax dollars for catch-up, right? I mean, these are a couple things that are pretty significant. I'm sure that you two will know a lot more after coming back in October.
Another thing we can also do in regards to voting is you can either choose to revisit this at a later date, or if you wanted to vote on it today, you could vote on it with the provision that it would not be enacted until the systems are in place.
I wonder, based on this part of the conversation, if Voya can tell us any of these that you're not able to. So basically, all of these that are optional, you are not able to administer in 2020.
Now, just the actual payroll changes. So obviously self-certification, that's fine. Qualified birth, we can take the repayment, that's fine. Qualified disaster distributions, first of the month rule. The only issue that we're having with Voya, the only issue that we have, because you already have a Roth in place, are these ER post dollars. That's the only one, Christy, we can't move forward with today. I mean, in 2023.
And as we mentioned, as both Billy and Wen mentioned, Voya's priority, as with every other record keeper, is these mandatory provisions, right? We've got to get everything situated for those first and foremost, then the optional provisions, the ones that aren't ready yet, like this employer source after tax. We don't have even timelines yet for when those might be available. So to what Billy was saying, you could adopt this and then make it available as soon as, we can administratively support it.
Any thoughts from the committee? Or how you wanna
Billy,
move on
my
this? Go ahead, Bob.
preference, my preference would be we postpone a decision on this until we have either post NAFTA meeting, or when more information is available on how it's going to go. We don't have to make it now, and that would be my motion, is that we delay action on this at this time.
I agree. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I just think it's great that some people are getting matching, and then obviously it seems like that might have some impact on some tax liability and some workforce software setup and stuff that are kind of out of our hands right now anyway. So I as an employee who doesn't get contributions from my employer, I just think I don't know, it wouldn't matter to me whether it was going in to a Roth or not. I would prefer it go into a Roth, to be honest. But somebody who makes a lot more money than I do might not. So I don't know.
Well, their
And
employer
then the language.
Oh, go ahead, Miranda.
Well, I was noting the language too, that it says that they may designate matching. It doesn't say they have to. So does that mean they retain the option, one or the other, of whatever is more convenient too?
Well, let's say
I don't
Ben dropped off, but let's say you're a brand new deputy and you're getting 4% POA, and you want to have all of your retirement be post-tax dollars. I mean, the 4% that the county would elect, I'm sure it would be like your own elective deferrals. You could say, I want my county dollars to be pre or post-tax. And I think this is going to be something that's much more appealing to the younger generation who, would have an early start. But there's issues. I think it's the most complicated thing on the platform about how, does that impact the employer? What about FICA? But it's something that we definitely want to consider as a whole, but I don't think we have enough information to really, and plus we can't even implement it till next year anyway.
If that.
Should come, I think we definitely should come back to this, but I agree, Miranda. I don't think there's enough interpretation and information to make any kind of decision today. Like Bob said, let's come back.
Anyone else feel that way as well, or do we have others that would like to move forward?
Yeah, Bob put a motion in to postpone this. I second that.
I did.
Perfect. Thank you.
See, was that Bronson?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oops. Christy had to leave us briefly.
I'm right here.
Oh,
That was a chat from my delay to the meeting.
okay. Okay, we still have 20 minutes left. We just have one more item left for 2023 before we can move on to 2024. So this one, qualified disaster distributions, and we don't have loans, just as a reminder, permits participants who meet certain criteria to take a distribution up to $22,000 aggregated across all of participants' plan accounts, including IRAs. Excuse me. Due to a federal disaster declaration, distributions are not subject to IRS 10% premature distribution penalty tax. Our distributions aren't already subject to that anyways, right? Because we're at 457.
Right. There is no 10% excise.
Yeah, so that part does not apply to us. Amounts distributed prior to the disaster to purchase a home can be recontributed. The employer is responsible for monitoring the $22,000 limit for each of the plans within its controlled group.
Employer responsibility.
Yeah. Well,
But
you are the plan fiduciaries.
You know, this is kind of a nice provision, though. I mean, we've had, like Bob said, the fires. We've had, I'm old enough to remember the flood, right? Is if there is a national disaster, something like that, which honestly could happen in Clackamas County, you're just allowing somebody to take a hardship. But probably if their house was wiped out, they qualify for a financial hardship anyway. But it's interesting that they're adding this at the national level.
Now, that's kind of my question. Could you do this and the regular hardship withdrawal at the same time, or would it be one or the other?
Well, Bronson and Bob could probably say if you didn't have flood insurance and your house was wiped out and you had, you know, your loss of your, you know, primary residence or imminent foreclosure, you would probably qualify for whatever you could prove was, you know, beyond what your insurance company would cover. It's just interesting that this isn't this again looks like something that doesn't require as much certification. It's kind of, where did the 22,000 come from? That's kind of a weird dollar amount. I don't know why they put a dollar amount on that, but I think, you know, it's only
Probably the federal poverty level.
it's only gonna occur if there's a natural disaster. So again, we're voting on something that hopefully has a less percentage of likelihood. And I'm sure that those distribution forms would be something that Voya would obviously, you know, provide. And Billy, I'm not sure when it says the employer is responsible for monitoring. I don't know why that burden would be on the county and not Voya when we would be the ones processing the distributions. That's kind of, Brent, maybe you can add some insight of why the employer would be responsible for the withdrawal limit monitoring.
Well, would it have to do if an employer has more than one record keeper?
Oh, maybe
Probably
so.
aggregate, yeah, in multiple.
Oh, yeah.
situations.
So you might have to sign up.
It probably wouldn't apply since we have
Right.
just one record keeper. And so
Yeah, it's like, that doesn't make sense. Yes, that is Billy, good point. Thank you. But I think this is not a bad thing, like, you know, birth and adoption, not very many people even apply for it. It's not like we tell everybody, you know, hey, we found out your wife's pregnant. Did you could take 5,000 out of Voya? We don't really promote that, but it is something, again, there's no cost to the county, no burden to the county.
And you know, when we were talking about the hardship withdrawals before and how when Voya processes one and it gets denied, how they will reach out to find out if there's anything else going on in the employee's life that might qualify. You know, maybe if they didn't, for whatever reason, qualify for something else under the regular hardship withdrawal, maybe this would be another option that they could look into. One of those other options.
Yeah, I think this is a positive thing. I think it's a very, very, very small likelihood that we'll ever use it, but it shows that the county does want to put things in place that could potentially benefit the employees should a hardship like this occur.
Anyone from the committee? Mostly hearing me and Wendy.
I have a question on this, Wendy, or others. On this one, it says that they have to meet certain criteria. So is that like the unforeseen emergency withdrawals where the employee certifies they meet the criteria, or is it approved by you or someone else if they meet?
Well, I'm sure when it says disaster, you know, like the flood or the FEMA people come in and say Clackamas County is considered a disaster zone with the flooding or the fires, we'll probably see more insight, or even after NAGDA, as these things come to fruition, like what is that hardship form? Is that a state of Oregon governor? Is that the county disaster? It's going to be, you know, not just disaster that, you know, you caught your place on fire. It's going to have to be
Yeah, it
something
has to be
that
a
was
federally declared disaster.
Remember,
And
like Verona, when that happened, that
Yep.
poor town, the whole town went underwater. I mean, you know.
Yep.
Great question, Bronson. I'm not sure. And this is something, again, we don't have to decide today, but I do think it's something positive that, you know, would show the employees that we are really making sure that we cover things like this that are for the first time available.
And Bronson, what I can say is based on, you know, standard operating procedure would dictate that whatever the declaration is, that whatever paperwork is required, it wouldn't be like a one size fits all. It would be based on whatever the emergency declaration is. And then we would design, the paperwork would specify bullet point, what qualifies and what documentation, if any, is required to substantiate the request. So.
Would the monitoring be a difficult thing? The employer being responsible to monitor the $22,000 limit, is that a challenge at all?
No, I think because Billy said, you know, if she had 3 different providers and she had to make sure that somebody wasn't going to each provider and requesting 22,000 out of their multiple accounts, that this isn't applicable to a single vendor provider situation.
Well, it's interesting because I still don't fully understand why we would have this provision at all. If there was a disaster that impacted someone that needed to use their funds, because I think they would qualify for an emergency distribution. I also don't understand the 22,000 either, and why that. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't, you know, I just don't, I guess, fully understand why. I mean, if you look at, say, Detroit, where you had a significant disaster where it was almost entirely wiped out, you know, I'm not seeing people look for 22,000 if they've, you know, if they're in a county where they have significant deferred funds that they need to use.
But you know, what's interesting about that, Bob, since I do Marion and Salem, most of those Detroit homes are vacation homes. And so IRS definition is primary imminent foreclosure or loss of your primary residence is like.
Okay.
Well, I
Well,
think Bob brings up a really good point that we already have the hardship withdrawal
Yeah.
option in place. This is
And there would be no
essentially
cap.
the same. This is essentially the same thing with more restrictions based on what I'm looking at.
Well, and then what also, like, who brought up the good question, do you get a financial hardship and a 22,000 just because you were a victim of a disaster? Or do you make the person apply for the actual out of pocket without insurance reimbursement for the specific dollar amount? I don't think we have enough information to see what those definitions of, like I think Bronson said, what qualifies. We can come back to this again when there's more information.
And
I
for
agree.
any acts like this that get passed, we tend to get additional information from the Treasury and the IRS as time goes on. Sorry, Bob, I cut you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. Like you said, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't fully understand it. And I think, I guess when I approach it, I look at a couple of things. You know, is it going to be a good thing for our members? And, you know, is it going to be something that we can actually administer reasonably if we're required to do that? And I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I just think we need to understand it a little bit better. And I mean, I'd be willing to look at it again when we have a little more information.
So Bob, it sounds like you're not ready to vote. Is anyone else feeling that way as well?
I could have easily been persuaded to vote for it. But I also agree that I kind of like having provisions and oversight and better guidelines on what these things mean. I think that having the guidelines helps protect participants as well from themselves sometimes. But and then just to avoid confusion and clarity and make sure that it's being, implemented correctly. But I agree. I don't think it sounds like a bad thing for participants at all. It sounds like it's an easy thing to monitor. And hopefully, even if we did approve it, hopefully nobody would need it. It's not like we're not in a super high risk area for continuous disasters, but fires seem to be more common. And I don't know, I was scared a couple of years ago for my own house, and I was just outside the disaster area, barely. But even then, I hate to think that I would have to use something like this when we have home insurance on our primary residences, most of us do. I don't know. So yeah, if you want to put it off, I'll put it off.
Okay. Any more discussion, or would someone like to make a motion? We have about 9 minutes left.
Motion to to consider at a later date.
And I'll second that.
Okay, everyone else? Go ahead and take the vote on that.
Yeah, I'm supportive of it, but I'm also supportive of pushing it out if we want to revisit it.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read off everybody's name, and the motion is to suspend until a later date. Say yes to accept that, or no if you want to address it now, or abstain. Elizabeth Comfort?
Yes.
Miranda Dean?
Yes.
Christy Durham?
I think Christy left.
Oh. Well, then we might not have, then yeah, we don't have a quorum. Well,
Hang on, Billy. I'll let her know she's in her office.
Okay.
Well, and with this one too, if we don't vote, it just doesn't, we'd have to bring it back to the meeting anyway, so.
True. That's
So,
correct.
whatever's easier for you though, Billy, in terms of
She's coming.
documentation.
Okay.
I can tell you that having working through all the Secure 2.0 stuff with other plan sponsors, many of them are deferring as you are, but should they have a federally, declared national emergency, they can their thought process is that they could adopt that at some point in time if that should ever occur. Because again, if you choose to adopt a provision like this, as long as you update your document by the end of that calendar year, you're good.
So I can't see, is Christy with us?
I know she's trying to join. I told her we needed her for a quorum.
I'm gonna go to Rob Sadowski.
Yes.
See, Evelyn had to leave, I believe. Brian Nava,
Yes.
Bronson Rueda,
Yes.
Ben had to leave, Bob Broman.
Yes.
Oh, you know what? Actually, we do have enough.
I'm back. Billy.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Christie's back.
Okay, so Christy, we are voting to postpone a vote on the national disaster qualified disaster distributions for a later date.
Okay.
So Bob made the motion to suspend it to a later date, and Miranda seconded. And so yes, a vote would be to do that.
Yes. And I would like to suggest that we take any of these that we are suspending and take them forward in a future meeting and set out a timeline for when we will come back to those and what criteria we need in order to make a vote.
So we actually did discuss that with this particular one. We're looking for
I have to
guidance.
jump back off though, okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Christy.
Okay, I'm going to save this.
Hey, Billy, it doesn't sound like we're gonna get to another one. Can I take a moment and explain why I voted no on the unforeseen emergency and my thought process? I'm interested to hear what others think about my thought process and if I'm way off or not.
Absolutely. We always entertain others' perspectives. I'll be definitely.
So from my perspective, county employees have 3 avenues of investing in their future. They have their pension, which is automatic. They have the IAP, which is automatic, and then they have the deferred comp, which is an option. Some people get it automatically as that option, but for most part, it's an option. All of these options here on the Secure Act 2.0 have to deal with the deferred comp portion, and that's a decision people have made largely to put their money into. And so when I vote no on the unforeseen emergency, that's giving the person a greater decision-making and power to do what they want with their money. Granted, I know Brent said that they may be abused, and true, but they can abuse power when they're filling out their taxes every year, their income taxes every year. And so I'm kind of in the camp of giving people the power to make their own decisions without perhaps unneeded oversight, in my opinion. Maybe it's needed by some, but that's kind of my thought process, to give the power to the people to make their decisions on their money, that they've made a decision to invest optionally in this deferred comp. And given that, you said a couple of people have said protect them against themselves, but they have those other 2 avenues of that 3-pronged investment approach to the county to have that investment in the future. And this is just an option that they have. And so that's kind of my thought process, giving the people the ability to manage their account as much as they want to.
Thank you, Bronson.
All right, or if anybody opposes, I'm very, if you know me, I'm very open to people opposing what I say and discussing it. So.
Well, actually, a few years ago, did some research on our deferred comp plan, because we were looking into potentially bringing on we have auto escalation, but it's voluntary. We don't it's not required. And one thing I've noticed is that our Tier 3 employees with PERS, they're not getting as big of a salary replacement from PERS as Tier 1 and Tier 2. And at that time, 70% of our employees were Tier 3. And so whereas Tier 1, Tier 2, the deferred comp was, more of an option, a nice thing to have. For Tier 3, it's really more needed, because they're not getting that salary replacement like their Tier 1 and Tier 2 counterparts. And so it becomes more, it's still optional.
Critical. It's critical for
yeah,
future
it's a better word,
retirement.
yeah. It's more critical for their savings to bridge any gaps for salary replacement and retirement. So that's another perspective on it as well. Anyone else? We've got 1 minute left. So these other options aren't available. Again, they're optional until 2024 would be the earliest they could be potentially available, assuming that systems are in place to implement them. Again, the county and Oracle, our PeopleSoft system, and Voya will be focusing on the mandatory requirements and then the optional ones thereafter. So we can come to these other items at a future meeting.
Yep, we should do that.
Okay.
Yep, please.
All right, so.
So Billy, when is our next meeting? Did you already give us that date?
No, we haven't scheduled it yet. So.
Is it like October, or are we waiting till the kids get back from NAGDA, or what are we, because that's probably, is that
Well,
put us in sync? Is that too late?
October, because let's see, we
August,
we
September?
need to review the second quarter once it's available. So probably either October or probably either August or September. August probably a lot of people still on vacations. Maybe September, so we can review the second quarter.
I'll be in Italy the last couple weeks, so just
Okay.
saying.
Good for you.
So not the week of Labor Day and not the last 2 weeks. So that second week of September is open. Okay.
That'll work.
I'm off the 11th and 12th.
Well, typically what I do
Not going to
is-
Italy, I'm going to San Juan, but for Miranda, I was in Italy last year. If you're going in the Tuscany, Florence region, I've got lots of recommendations.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm going to Rome, Florence, Venice, and then Greece. I'll be in Santorini, Athens.
Oh my God, that sounds
Oh,
like
yeah.
a dream trip.
It's gonna
Good
be
for you.
awesome.
All right, well, I'll get together with Brent and Shelley. We'll come up with some dates and some times. Usually what I'll do is once we have those established, I do the meeting invite, and I can't see what you actually have as your appointments, but I can see stuff is blocked out. And so I usually will look to see who's the most, a date and time that the majority of you are available. So it's not perfect. I won't be able to always, schedule a meeting. And thank you everyone for your time and good
Thank you,
conversation
Billy,
today.
putting this all together. I
Have
think
a
it was
good
a
one.
great session.
Yeah,
Thank you,
good to see
everybody.
you.
Happy
Thanks,
summer.
everybody.
Yeah.
Nice to
Thanks,
meet you.
Bye
Billy.
now.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.